Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God. I'm Abby.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Fletcher.
And today's story is about the Roman Caesars.
The Roman Caesars.
With Mott's Clamato included.
Right. Or not.
Yeah, or not.
Gross.
Let's not. Gross.
Okay, well, we have a question. And our question is, because we're talking about the Caesars, the Roman, we're a number of different Caesars, we're looking for your favorite Greco-Roman inspired thing. Anything. It can be, well, just it can be anything.
By name, by anything, yeah.
Right.
Inspired, but it has to have its origins or inspiration.
Stop
from
making this so
Greco-Roman.
specific. I have an answer in my mind.
All right, what is it? We
All right,
want to
get
hear
it.
it.
Spit it out before I
All right.
go any more
Eliminate it with her
specifics.
specifics.
Just for the record, I don't like this because I would ever want to do this or be in this, but I think that they're hilarious, and early 2000s rom-coms did a great job of depicting them. Sorority houses.
Sorority,
Nice.
yeah,
There you
okay.
go.
Alpha Nu.
Theta Kappa.
Delta Nu.
What's the Monsters University
Delta
one?
Nu, Delta Nu, Nu,
Uzma Kappa. What is it? Something like that.
You know what? I hate all the references that we make on this podcast because I end up getting outed. I've never seen Monsters University. I've only
Okay.
seen parts of Monsters Inc.
What about,
That's fair.
what's the one with Amanda Bynes, that Greek, what, sorority?
Bynes.
She's like, basically Snow White.
I don't
It's
remember.
Sydney White and the something.
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't
classic.
seen
No.
it. I
Sorority
know what you're talking
girls.
about.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
And I know what you're talking about.
She's trying to get in a sorority house, and she's a major tomboy, and it's very funny.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We
All
don't
right.
have those in Canada. If you're an American
Sororities?
listener,
They do
I
have
think
them in
there's
Canada.
some sororities.
not
They do.
really.
No.
Though. It's
Yeah.
not like culty
No.
and
Yeah.
super
It's not
legitimate
culty.
and the hazing and the
Right.
Yeah,
rushing
it's a
and
little freaky. But yeah, no, in Canada, I had some friends that were in them in university. It was weird.
Yeah.
They were a little lame.
I don't know why you'd want to
Canada.
be a part, but you chose this.
Yeah,
That's
no,
your
I
favorite.
think just because basically I like
Because you like the movies, the
that
90s rom-com.
no, to early
Yeah.
2000s.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
just so funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
All right,
good.
Fletcher, what do you got?
Oof. I'm gonna
Or are
say.
you stealing mine?
No. Well, I doubt it. If you're going with the, I'm gonna steal yours probably.
Wow.
Little Caesars
Oh, Little Caesars.
Pizza,
Hi, Riley.
of course.
Shout out to my daughter.
Who works at Little Caesars? They make a fantastic deep dish pizza with the crispy edges.
And
I don't
the
know how
breadsticks.
She
how
told me
Roman that
today-
actually is.
She told me today on her way to work that they're dropping new products. There's a bacon wrapped something
You
or other.
scared me for a second. You said dropping. I'm like, what are they dropping? And I
No,
thought
no,
you meant
they're
like they're
like
going
a
to drop
new
something off
product
their
drop, like
menu.
it's-
Product drop.
Yeah, so there's like a bacon wrapped something type
Gross.
of pizza. I'm like, I
That doesn't
think I
sound
need to
good.
try that.
Well, if you can get us a discount, Riley, that'd be much
Yeah.
I mean,
appreciated.
she's working right now. If she's
Right.
on the lobby,
let's
then
go.
we'll go.
I know. Last time
yeah, I don't
went
know
to Little
how-
Caesars, she was there. She served me.
There you go.
how Roman Little Caesars actually is. I mean, Italians made pizza, so that's as close as
Okay,
we're gonna
There's
get.
no way-
Stop being specific about the details here, guys.
There's no way that
Their
pizza
mascot is a
looked
little
anything
guy
like
with the
ours.
olive
That's
leaf
right.
around his
Pizza,
head.
pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mine, I mixed martial arts because the roots go back
punch.
to like Greco-Roman wrestling, and I'm a fan of mixed martial arts. I like
That's
watching,
cool, yeah.
and
Men wrestle and get all sweaty too.
that's, yeah.
I think they did it naked originally.
Well, yeah. So
Greco-Roman wrestling.
I'm glad that
gosh.
they've evolved to
Me too.
wearing clothing.
Nice shorts,
And
yeah.
it's good with sponsors and stuff on their
Much
shorts.
better.
It's
Oh
a
my
little bit
gosh.
better
I don't know
than it was.
if pay-per-view would pick it up if it was
mean-
still the old-fashioned way.
You're right. Let's move on. So, as always, we do actually encourage you to read the stories for yourselves.
This is
but
a
this
Bible
is
podcast,
this is
for
about
the record.
yes, that's right. Wow. Can I change my answer? Nope. Little
From naked
Caesars.
wrestling.
So yeah, we do encourage you to read the stories for yourselves in order to get a whole picture of what's going on. But today's is not really a story. We're just kind of highlighting the different Caesars that we know about. one of whom is spoken of in the Bible, and others that we know about through history and exist during the biblical times. But you can get a picture of the Caesars and kind of how life was by reading the Gospels and the book of Acts, because we do see their influence and interaction happening throughout those books.
Yeah.
So, as we said, we are moving forward. This week we're in the New Testament, because that's
we made it.
that's when the Romans appear on the scene. So the Old Testament ends with Nehemiah, and he restores the walls in Jerusalem, and the law is reestablished in partnership with Ezra. And we have the prophecy of Malachi, or as some people like to say, the Italian prophet Malachi. Hey, forget about it.
I don't think people like to say that.
I'd love to say it personally, but then after Malachi's prophecy, there's actually 400 years with no biblical writings. And so this is referred to as 400 years of silence, although I don't believe that God has ever been silent in that way. There just isn't the writing that would...
On the wall, literally.
Yeah. There's no writing during, so we call it
like
the
specific prophets. Or
specific prophets
Yeah.
with specific messages for his people. But I'm sure people encountered him during those 400 years, and so that's referred to as the intertestamental period. And the New Testament then starts with the birth of John the Baptist and the birth of Jesus, and that happens around 6 to 5 BC. A really important thing that we need to realize when we are reading the Gospels is that we are actually given a historic marker to help us put the story into context. So Matthew 2 verse 1, Luke 1 verse 5, and Luke 2 verse 1, they all mention the names of the rulers at this time. And these passages mention Herod and Caesar Augustus, who were both Roman leaders.
So yeah, the Bible really puts an emphasis on the historicity and the fact that, these things actually happened. Jesus really lived at a real time in history, and that's really cool. And that's kind of the reason we talk about the history, the background, and the geography of the Bible, is because these things actually happened to people in a time and a place different from our own, but still in this world. So that's really cool, and that's why we try to see what's going on. So like Jay said, the New Testament starts with John the Baptist and Jesus, but today we're talking about the Caesars from Rome, and they're the emperors kind of the Roman Empire.
Right.
And if you remember last week, we talked about Xerxes and Haman, and they were from the Persian Empire. Well, they were conquered by people called the Greeks, led by a man named Alexander the Great, not the grape. And that happened around in the 4th century BC.
And I think we've noted in past seasons that he gave himself that name, the Great.
Yeah,
so
It's Alexander the Humble.
Always great when you establish your greatness by naming yourself
your own
great.
name. Yeah, so that happened around the 4th century BC. The next big superpower, of course, in the ancient world is Rome.
Right.
And they conquer the Greeks by 146 BC. And then basically take over the rest of the Mediterranean region. And then by 63 BC, they controlled Jerusalem in Judea, which is Israel. As for their leaders, who we're talking about today, were Caesar. Rome started out as a republic. So if you recognize that name from certain governments, like the U.S. is called a republic. And it's basically led by a senate, and it was considered actually one of the earliest forms of representative democracy, which we often think of as a modern idea. But Rome had it in place, even though it looked a little bit different to our modern governments.
Right. Also, there was a republic and a senate in a galaxy far
away. That's right. And well, look what happened. The emperor. I think it's based on Rome. I think Star
maybe.
Wars was.
Yeah.
With the emperor. Anyway, so big things happened. If you remember Star Wars, the emperor took over the Galactic Senate. But this man named Julius Caesar, who was a military general and a politician, he started a civil war, killed a bunch of people, and won. And he basically made himself dictator for life.
Right. I'm in charge now.
Yeah. That's what he did. He was a military. He marched on Rome with his army, said, "I'm in charge," and it worked. Eventually, some senators weren't very happy about this, and they end up assassinating him, and that happened in 44 BC.
My parents went on a trip to Italy without me this year. They promised me they would anyways. Sad. I'm not bitter about it at all. And they went to the spot where he was assassinated. They have a picture there.
Et tu, Brute. That's what he said when he died. It means,
what is that?
Brutus is the guy who killed him. And he goes, and you, Brutus, you're killing me too? Basically, is what he's saying. so his friend betrayed him. Anyway, Julius is assassinated in 44 BC, and then that led to another civil war struggle for power until one of the people we're talking about today in our story, who I won't mention now, you'll see.
Right.
Let me guess, it's a Caesar.
It is a Caesar. It is the very first emperor of Rome.
All right. Well, speaking of, where are we located? Guess what? We're in Rome.
When in Rome.
When in Rome. All right. Yeah. So Rome is obviously in the Mediterranean, in Italy, and then there's some things that also take place in Jerusalem. So pretty basic. We know all these places because they're all named the same thing as they are modernly.
And if you look at a map of the Mediterranean, just go around the entire Mediterranean, you say that's what they controlled.
That's right.
All of it. We got, the whole thing.
The whole area.
The whole
except maybe
area.
part of the lower, like the African countries.
They had
But
Egypt, and they had a lot of
Egypt,
even over to Morocco.
Yeah.
And to Spain. It's crazy. Look it up. Anyway, so we're going to start. I didn't say it earlier. I'm going to say it now. Caesar Augustus.
Issued a decree.
Yes.
The census should be taken throughout the whole.
If you've read the Christmas
Roman.
story,
That's right.
I'm sure you've read that passage in Luke.
Even if you haven't read it, maybe you've watched Peanuts Christmas.
Is
or
it
Charlie
in there?
Brown.
Yeah, he's
that's
reading it on stage.
That
Yeah.
was actually my very first. I think it was my first play. I was at a musical at the church. It was called Angel Alert, and I was narrator number 1.
Okay.
And you read
And
that.
that was my
There you go.
passage to read. And
Nice.
to this day, I remember the whole thing.
Very nice.
There you go.
So yeah, this guy named
We
Caesar
should get
Augustus.
you into this year's.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not here Christmas Eve.
Oh, that's too bad. Caesar Augustus. His real name was Gaius Octavian, and he was the adopted son of Julius Caesar.
He wasn't even a Caesar. Really?
Well,
like by birth.
he's adopted.
Yeah.
Illegitimate. Anyway, he was the first and most successful of all the Roman emperors. So
Right.
he's
He wasn't
the guy.
even legit.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Look at
those
that.
Romans, man,
Fakers.
can't keep it together. He reigned, I think, one of the longest Caesars from 27 BC until 14 AD, and famously he beat Mark Antony and Cleopatra,
Queen of the Night.
who is Egyptian, and they
You're
took
not going to
over
sing any
Egypt.
Mark Anthony songs?
I don't know any Mark Anthony.
Yeah.
That Cleopatra song is from when my mom did a little musical for her grade 2 class
There you
years
go.
ago. So that's where my brain goes.
There you go.
Nice. What is the musical? Is it from? Or
I
what
don't know.
movie is it from?
Cleopatra?
Is there a movie?
Yeah, there's a Cleopatra
There you
movie
go,
with
Mark
Elizabeth
Antony.
Taylor.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yeah,
Not a
it's
musical.
like a class, not a musical.
No.
It's like 3 hours long.
It's like Jesus
Good
Christ
movie.
Superstar.
Good movie.
Anyway, haven't seen either of them.
No, that one.
So
one's
a really important thing about Caesar Augustus, or not Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, sorry, is that he took a couple different titles that you might recognize, and that is that of chief priest and son of God.
Right.
In Latin, those are Pontifex Maximus and Divi Filius, if you want to speak Latin.
Right.
But yeah, the titles of chief priest and son of God.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cool things we see is in the Gospel of Luke, he tries to point out that, look, this guy Augustus
Right.
as the son of God and the chief priest, but I'm going to introduce you to this man named Jesus, and he is the real owner of those, the rightful owner of those titles, son
yeah.
of God and high priest.
Yep. And that's it. Luke is writing very specifically to a Greek and Roman audience, which is establishing those truths. Which is kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. So Augustus is actually only mentioned once in the Bible, in Luke chapter 2, verse 1. Abby's going to say it again.
Quote that, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken throughout the entire Roman Empire.
So yeah, he takes this census near the birth of Jesus and basically says everybody has to go back to their hometowns.
Right.
And of course, if we look at the genealogy in the book of Matthew, we see Jesus is the son. Whereas it's also in Luke chapter 4, I want to say, but Jesus is the son of Joseph, who is the son of descendants
Healy.
that
Right.
goes back to the son of David and the
David.
son of Jesse. And Jesse lived in Bethlehem.
Yep.
So Joseph
Wait, Fletcher,
then
you
has to
mean
take
you
his
can't,
wife.
You can't go back and name all the
I-
grandfathers
ooh.
and great grandfathers.
In season 1, I might
We
have
read
been
it.
able to.
You
We
read
read
it.
it that one
No,
time.
I mean
no, we read
in
the
your
Matthew
mind.
In my
genealogy.
memory, no, I can't.
I will give you
got
$10 if
nothing.
you can memorize the whole genealogy of
If I could
Jesus.
memorize, I could do
Yeah.
it. I don't have it off the top of my head. But yeah, Joseph comes.
Is
from
that an open
Bethlehem.
offer to all listeners?
Send us a video.
Yeah, if you can send me a video, memorized it, I
Duet
won't give
us
you
on this week's
$10.
TikTok.
Do it.
But I'll give you a high five.
There we go. Two high
We'll
fives.
duet
that
your
equals 10.
TikTok if you send it to us,
Fletcher will
saying
do
the
your
whole
TikTok.
genealogy.
Yeah.
I'll be impressed. I'll
There
duet
we
your
go.
TikTok. Anyway, yeah. So Joseph has to move back to Bethlehem with his wife Mary. Famously, you know who they are. They're the parents of Jesus. And so there was this prophecy in the book of Malachi, the Malachi Italian prophet,
Forget about it.
that the Messiah would be born in the town of Bethlehem. So inadvertently, Augustus calls this census to figure out who's in the Roman Empire.
And also, I think another reason for a census is to prove how great you are as well, to number your people. And so in his kind of act of pride, where he's like, this is how amazing I am, this is my empire, he actually is a part of fulfilling a prophecy that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem.
And then that ends up turning true. Jesus is born in Bethlehem. Abby, do you have the rest of the Luke 2 chapter, like the whole Peanuts script?
I don't know where to start.
From the beginning.
Caesar Augustus issued a decree.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're just the same first line over.
No,
and
I
over.
think the part that the end of my narrator part ended at, so Joseph and Mary began the long and tiring journey to Bethlehem.
There you
There
go.
it is.
They sure did.
That was the end of it.
So yeah, Caesar Augustus eventually dies, as all men do.
Yes.
And woman.
And women. But the emphasis is he probably wasn't the son of God,
Right.
or if he's dying like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the son of Augustus, his name is Tiberius Caesar, and he is the next in line, and he reigns from 14 to 37 AD. And we don't really hear much about Tiberius, but he is the I think there's a verse somewhere, I forget where it is, but it talks about how he was in the 15th year when John the Baptist started his ministry.
Right.
And if you know the dates, 14 to 37 AD, we know Jesus was crucified somewhere around 30 AD. Tiberius was the Caesar while Jesus was crucified. And that means he was the boss of Pontius Pilate.
Right.
The governor.
Governor,
There you go. Do you know that one too?
No, that wasn't
The governor
narrator
of Judea So he was Pontius Pilate's boss.
Yeah.
Right, so next, Claudius Caesar, and he reigned from 41 to 54 AD, and if you read some of the sections in the New Testament, in Paul's letters, it talks about how the Jews were removed from Rome, and that famously happened in 49 AD, and that's due to Claudius Caesar, although he's not mentioned by name.
Right.
Next up, the big man himself, Caesar Nero.
What's funny is he wasn't actually a big man.
No, he was small. He
quite
played
small,
some music. He wasn't a tough guy.
He liked arts and poetry.
Yeah.
And was kind of like.
I heard a story, so I'm researching for this podcast, and I'm listening to this speaker talk about it. And he goes, Nero used to hold these concerts, and he wouldn't let people leave his concerts. He'd just play for hours and hours and say, you have to stay.
You have to stay.
And then
Can
there's
you
like
imagine?
Roman historians that say like people gave birth during some of his concerts because they weren't allowed to leave. That's how long and tedious his concerts were, and he wouldn't let people leave.
What a life.
So yeah, that's a cool tidbit about Nero that I found out. Anyway,
That's
so
incredible.
yeah,
See,
Nero.
he did all these wacky things without any consequences.
was a
He
bit
is
of a
wacky.
nutbar.
He's a nutbar. Anyway, his reign started out good, actually. So he's the stepson of Claudius, who was the previous Caesar, and he reigned from 54 to 68 AD. And he reigned kind of during the time of the apostles. And Paul is the one, if you remember back in Acts, he appeared before one of the Caesars to present his case. And that is the Caesar that he would have presented in front of is Nero.
Right.
Although he's not mentioned by name in the book of Acts.
Right.
Famously, there was a fire in Rome in 64 AD, and there were like suspicions about who did this.
Yeah.
Nero was out of the country at this time. He was out of the city doing other things, but these rumors started to flood in that Nero's the one who actually burnt down the city, because after the burning a couple weeks, he laid out these big plans on how we're going to redo the city.
Right.
So he came up with these plans that couldn't have been made in a couple weeks.
Yeah. He just happened to have
These
great
plans
idea.
exactly. So Nero's like, I don't want to take the blame for burning Rome down. You know who we can blame? There's these new weird Jewish sect.
There's a cult thing.
There's this cult going around Rome. I don't like it. And they're called the Christians.
Yeah.
The Christ followers. And so he said, look, this is the Christians' fault. They burned down the city.
Which is
Blame
the first time that they're referred to as
Christians as
is
well.
under
yeah.
Nero's rule.
So because of this, obviously the Roman people weren't happy, and basically Nero put free reign on, saying, look, you can go persecute, take them out, kill the Christians. They were sought out and they were killed. They were killed by crucifixion. They were eaten by dogs. People sicked their dogs on them. One of them, Nero, burned people and then used them as torches at one of his parties. So he went all out on killing these Christians. Traditionally, this is actually when Peter and Paul are killed, although there's differing opinions in when they actually died. While Paul was in prison in Rome. This is one of the debated dates about that. Yeah. So yeah, that's the third and probably most outright evil of the Caesars, or fourth, I think is what we're talking now. But the outright evil of the Caesars and what they did against Christians at that time.
Well, great story, Fletcher.
That's all the Caesars I've heard of. If you've heard of any more. Yeah.
Yeah, so how do they fit into the story of the Bible? What do they help to fulfill the story of God throughout the rest of the Bible?
Well, and I think one of the main things that we see is they were all either self-proclaimed but held up as God, right? They placed themselves as deity, and the understanding was that that the gods would have put them in charge because of their greatness, and that they should be seen as deity. And what we see is that they operate 100% opposite of how God actually operates and how we as followers of God are called to operate. And so I think what they do is they give us an example of just the opposite of how to live, or how I guess better worded is how not to live as Christians and as followers of God. And we see how, as we mentioned with Caesar Augustus, it was his pride that actually led to the fulfillment of the prophecy of Jesus being born in Jerusalem, well, in Bethlehem. And so, yeah, I think we just see this contrast very clearly demonstrated as to how not to live, and how opposite to that God calls us to live.
One thing I noticed while I was kind of doing the research and looking is the sheer contrast between the person of Jesus historically and these leaders. Like, you get this emperor of the biggest empire that's ever existed. Well, they'd claim, I'm sure, but Caesar Augustus, son of God, leader of the church, high priest, king of all powerful. And then this fisherman from this little village in Judea, like this tiny little province in Rome, ends up being the most famous person who'd ever lived in throughout history. And it had nothing to do with political power. Right. I mean, these guys were carpenter in a fishing village, Galilee.
I was like, is he talking about Peter or Jesus? It's Jesus.
Jesus is who I'm talking about. Sorry. Yeah, what is he? A carpenter from a fishing town of Nazareth in Galilee, and he was nobody. And the famousness of his name nowadays, like, you look, okay, you probably wouldn't have heard much about Julius Caesar, Tiberius Caesar, Caesar Nero, Claudius Caesar. Like, they go down in history as the people that persecuted the church and the people that killed Jesus. Yeah. Not as their own, I'm the Son of God, you should remember me for my name's sake. So,
and that's it. Like, in Abby's quote, issued a decree, right? Caesar Augustus issued a decree. Jesus simply lived his life and lived in complete dependence on God and doing what the Holy Spirit led him to do. But even we see the temptation that he's led into the wilderness, and he's tempted, and part of that temptation is to set yourself up, take your place on the throne. Like, I'll give you all of these kingdoms. And Jesus is like, no, that's not what I'm meant to do. I'm not here to and it sounds kind of weird to say it this way. Jesus is not here to establish his greatness, although he does just that in the way that he lives, and becomes the rightful owner of these titles that we talked about. but he doesn't force that on the world. He doesn't force that on people and say, you need to
Call me this.
bow to me and
Call me the Son of God. Call me the High Priest. Call me this. Call me that. And conquer nations in order to do that. Yeah, he set the example with his life and then transformed the entire world through that. And you see it. We're sitting here across the world from where he lived 2,000 years later, talking about him and not... Well, we are talking about Caesars, but because of him, not because of their own actions, which I find just incredibly cool. The impact that Jesus had. Or you see that, Nero is sitting there killing these Christians, and they're dying for the risen Jesus. That's why they were dying, is because they believed in Jesus. Yeah. And they were willing to. So, yeah, I find that just incredibly impactful that Jesus is the one who went down in history, not these super powerful world leaders.
That's right.
Although I do like that they are part of history, right? Like these are people that are recognized outside of Christian, quote unquote, Christian history textbooks. Like other people will recognize them, and so it's cool that it's just another parallel that like history draws to the Bible and to the Word of God. So just another confirmation there, which I love.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. Anyone have anything else to add? All right. Okay. Well,
just maybe some
Caesar
close to those Greco-Roman wrestlers.
A decree
that a census should be taken of the entire Roman Empire.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening.
Bye for now.